Welcome to the Bare Essentials Podcast, where the talk is real and hibernating on your goals is not an option.
Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Charles Wallace. Today's guest is a British adventure athlete. He grew up in the south of England and early on was addicted to travel and adventure. Even though he tried to suppress these desires and pursue a traditional career path as a landscape architect in London, he soon left the confines of his office to get back in touch with his adventurous roots. He is currently the host of his own podcast, The Modern Adventurer, where he talks to other adventurers and explorers like himself who do incredible things around the world. I am pleased to introduce to you John Horsfall. John, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. How are you?
Charles, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm absolutely delighted to be on and to talk to you about all things adventure today.
Great, John. Would you mind giving a brief introduction of yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. At the moment, I'm based in London, and I'd probably consider myself an adventure athlete slash photographer. So before COVID, I was going around sort of traveling the world, doing expeditions in different sort of areas from Central Asia, Africa, the Middle East. And sort of what I was doing was trying to sort of go on the sort of back country, the back roads, and explore stuff that was outside the sort of tourist routes, stuff that you don't hear about, and meet the local people and really immerse myself into these cultures and countries to really try and understand, to experience a completely new way of thinking. And with that, I've traveled to some amazing places over the years, and I'm delighted to sort of probably talk a bit more about it later on in the podcast.
John, that was the part that intrigued me about you when I saw your bio. I do a lot of interviews on the show focused on mindset, fitness, things like that, but I feel like they all come at it from a purely, I'll call it fitness perspective, more traditional fitness perspective. So when I saw some of the things that you were doing, I really was excited to try to portray some of that adventure to people, especially the people who maybe not so much can be in a gym setting all the time, right? They like to get outdoors and obviously, as you know, getting outdoors is so great for our health anyway. So I wanted to definitely talk about that and some of the amazing adventures that I've seen that you have done. Um, John, just to start out, were you like this growing up, right? Was it the adventure in you? Was it something that was, you always knew as a child, growing up as a teenager, or is it something that you really discovered later on in life?
I think it's probably a mixture of both. I've always been sporty. I absolutely love sport. I don't know about your audience, but I'm a huge sort of soccer slash football fan. I played it, tennis, cricket, which is a bit more niche towards the British audience. But and so I just anything with a ball and running around and playing in the woods, whatever it is, I just love doing that. And when it sort of came to travel and adventure, I suppose growing up, I was lucky as my father lived abroad, so I sort of went out, and that sort of became sort of normal to me. So travel was sort of more of a normality to me than not. And I'd love to say that I've always, been this super adventurous person, but looking back, I don't think I was. I sort of feel like I slightly enjoyed comfort, especially sort of maybe through my university. And it's actually only when I left that I started to really enjoy discomfort and sort of pushing oneself just that little bit further. And it's interesting, Charles, you sort of talk about mindset and doing that. It's incredibly difficult to change behavior, especially if you are in the sort of day-to-day routine. And what I was doing wasn't exactly a normal, let's say, career path. And so with that, you sort of, when you speak to people about this, maybe your close circle, they find it sort of slightly extraordinary. And so you're not exactly encouraged to do this. So to sort of break out of that, to go and do something actually takes, I think, quite a bit of effort to sort of change the narrative of your thinking.
John, that's a fantastic point. I'm really glad you touched on comfort in the very beginning here. I was just speaking about comfort zone the other day and how don't be a prisoner of your own comfort zone, right? And how it just, in order to grow, you need to get outside of your comfort zone. And you also mentioned about your like a close circle. I think that's so important too. And I think people in general tend to mimic the people that they are close to, the people they surround themselves with. So ultimately, when I see someone like you, and then I hear also that you say you haven't always been like that, to me, that's somewhat comforting because I think it gives hope to people that are listening, right? Because for myself, I'm 50 years old and I sit back now and I go, you know what? It's not too late to change. Like we can start to move forward and do other things. So now we talked about comfort zone. John, one thing that jumped out at me that I had to ask you about was you ran 27 marathons in 1 month, I believe, across Kenya. Is that right? What the hell was that like? And what can you talk about your mindset before that, during it, after it?
Well, it's really interesting because, yeah, that out of all my trips, that's the one where my mindset was probably at my most extreme, in a sense of I was working a very normal, 9 to 5 in an architecture firm, and I wasn't loving it. I enjoyed the work, but I didn't love what I did, and I felt like I had to be passionate about what I did. And when I sort of came to this, I was slowly starting to get into running. Like I sort of felt like I should probably learn to love running, which I wasn't that that fond of. And so I felt that maybe naively, people in your audience might be like, "Oh, what? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." But the idea was, in order to do it, I needed to sort of really go to the extreme. And at the time, I my sister was going out to on holiday there, and so she was like, "Do you want to come on holiday?" And I was like, "Actually, that's quite a good idea. I might." And at the time, also, I was looking at maybe doing the Marathon de Sable, which is a 7-day marathon across the desert. And actually, the idea of running across country was far more interesting and slightly cheaper than the Marathon de Sable. And so I sort of, I had been before, but I'd never been like to explore the country. It's like, you going to New York and saying that you've been to America. I mean, there's so much more of the country to explore. It's sort of the same thing. And so in order to sort of do that, not being a marathon runner, not knowing the country that well, I sort of booked the ticket and said I was going to do it, and then quit my job. I say quit my job. I I I got another job and then told them that I was doing it, and they're like, yeah, okay, you go and then come back after. And so with that, I sort of, by booking the ticket, it's a very good motivation to actually do it. It's very easy to say, oh, I'm going to go and do this big trip, but to actually book it, say you're going to go and do it, and then do it, it's a whole new ball game. And with that, I suppose my mindset was 100% like focused on, no matter what happens, I will complete this, whether I have to walk, run, crawl, or whatever happens, I will go from A to B. And whatever happens in the middle, I won't. And what actually happened was, the first day I started on a marathon, started my first marathon that I ever done on a mountain at an altitude of 3,000 meters above sea level. And being training in London, which is at sea level, it was quite difficult in a sense of, running what should take 3 or 4 hours ended up taking about 5 or 6, and with a little break in between here and there. But getting up every day, you sort of get into the swing of things. And, the people I met and everything that went with it was just so exciting. And like everything was new, everything was a new experience. And for your listeners, running day after day. Oh, and another thing was when you plan this journey, you're looking on Google Maps and you're like looking at different places to stop for like a snack or something, because I'm doing this solo and self-supported. It's only me on my own with a backpack. And I sort of looked at little villages which I might be able to stop. And then once I got to these villages, they were nothing but little huts with only bananas and avocados. So for lunch, sometimes running from morning till night, I would just be eating a banana and avocado. So I was losing quite a lot of body weight very rapidly at the beginning. But also with it, I sort of got into the sort of swing of things, and people would, say I'd stay with, would then sort of pull me off to the next person 26 miles down the road. And this whole sort of process just sort of opened my eyes up to just a whole new way of experiencing it. And what I wanted to show was just the amazing beauty, the amazing people of Kenya, because over the last few years, there's been like few issues with like elections and tribal issues. And so I wanted to show the country in a really positive light, which was, and it's just full of these incredible people and scenery. And so with it, running day after day, having never run a marathon, your body does start to break down. I got shin splints on both legs. And then on day 13, I was staying with some friends of friends of friends, someone who knew someone. And they took me to their favorite restaurant, which was a Naya Choma, as they call it. It's basically a barbecued shack. And unfortunately, my sensitive stomach was very much not used to the sort of meats, the goats that are cooked on the barbecue, and I got really bad food poisoning. But again, I wanted to complete this journey within a month or so. And with that, I sort of kept sort of pushing. And so my mindset was very much, whatever happens, I just need to keep moving. And, you probably tell me now, if I wanted to go for a run 10 kilometers down the road, I'd probably try and make a million excuses. But for me, I was just like, no, this is what I have to do. And it sort of took it to a slight extreme, because you're sort of with shin splints, with food poisoning. My mindset was just always to just put one step forward. And as long as I could do that, I could just keep moving forward. And as I say, I mean, I could carry on speaking for hours about this, but I'm sure you probably want to jump in with something.
No, John, honestly, listening to that, I want to bring up a name over here in the United States. Are you familiar with David Goggins?
Yes, David Goggins.
It's similar, not similar, but it's similar but different. But as you start to talk about just that extreme, right? Just saying, you know what, I'm gonna go to Kenya and run across the country. It reminded me of that. And you mentioned some things that's similar to when I hear him talk about some of his first like ultra marathons and things like that. The shin splints were huge. He talked about that. I can only imagine though when you had food poisoning on top of it. I mean, John, I want to ask you bluntly: were there times at some point where you were just like, "No, I'm done. I can't do any more."
Yeah, absolutely. There was a time. So basically, the capital of Kenya is Nairobi, and it was about halfway between the Ugandan border, where I was going from, and the Kenyan coast. So it's about sort of day 15, day 16, and about, about sort of 30, 40 miles from Nairobi, I had shin splints in my legs. I had food poisoning. So I was still running without eating. And so I was losing a humongous amount of weight. And for your audience, you probably can't see me. I'm not exactly a big guy. I'm quite skinny and whatnot. And so with that, I just fell into sort of really dark times just before it, because I don't know, I always get quite sort of down when you don't eat, and that was what's happening. I wasn't getting enough calories in, and so it was a really sort of dark time. And for a lot of it, I just didn't think, I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. and you you're sort of lying. I remember sitting under a tree, sweating buckets. It's absolutely boiling. We're still at quite a bit of an altitude. And then I was sort of just thinking, why am I doing this? And the reason being was I was doing it for a charity out there, a children's orphanage, and also for other reasons. And so by doing that, my problems just seemed completely small and insignificant compared to others. And so, I just sort of thought, well, if I can't run to the capital, I'll just walk and we'll get there. And I just remember I finally got there. And beforehand, I had been staying with a friend who had sort of put me up, and his flatmate opened the door and didn't even recognize me, even though she had met me 2 weeks earlier. Because I'd lost so much weight. I probably had a bit more stubble than I do now. So I remember that night I had some food, and after a massive meal, I suddenly just completely re-energized and was like, right, tomorrow I'll just get up and run across the capital without even like thinking about it. I was just like, oh yeah, tomorrow I'll just get up and then come back and whatnot. And what was actually really interesting, and this is the sort of things that could happen when you sort of do this. It's because, none of this was planned. It was more like, when you put a Google from A to B, whether you're going from like Philadelphia to New York or, San Francisco to New York, it just does a route and that says that's the route you should take. And you're like, okay, I'll take that route. And that's basically the route I was taking. And what actually happened, which was really interesting, was the ex-vice president of Kenya had got wind of my story on a plane. So he'd sort of heard about it, managed to get my number. So this is probably the equivalent of, I think maybe like Al Gore in America, getting wind of my story and saying, oh, well, do you want to come and, meet me? And I was like, yeah, of course. I had no idea who he was. And so the next day after that, I sort of rested up in Nairobi and went to go and meet him. And so I went, still in my running gear. I'd sort of spoken to people about this, and they were like, oh no, you need to wear a suit. He's very formal and you need to call him Your Excellency and everything. And I didn't have a suit because all I had was one t-shirt to run in, one pair of shorts and a pair of trainers and my wash bag in the back and maybe a little jumper or something. So I didn't have anything. And so I turned up at his office, waiting for him. Everyone's there in suit and tie. I'm there in my running gear, about to go and do another marathon or whatnot. And anyway, he sort of invites me in, gives me a shake on the hand, and then suddenly he goes, oh, we'll go and meet the media. And I'm like, I was sort of expecting a schoolboy doing a newspaper report for his school, being like, oh, this guy's running across the country. But no, it was like full-blown press conference. We're at the front. He's sitting there. All the cameras are there live on, Channel 1, BBC, not BBC, whatever the African or Kenyan equivalent was. And then I just thought, okay, well, I'm just going to stand here. He's probably going to introduce me. And he just suddenly goes, oh, John, why don't you just tell them what you're doing? And I wasn't prepared or anything. I gave some sort of speech about what I was doing, but slightly underprepared, let's say. And then he went on and talked about politics and whatnot. But it was just this one sort of, what do you call it? This one image, or this one, these little moments that happened along the way that you always remember. And, no, that would have never have happened. You wouldn't have got the chance to meet, let's say, the vice president or the ex-vice president, if you weren't prepared to sort of go out and try something new.
Yeah, I would say. And John, listening to you talk about that and some of just the food poisoning, all of what you talk about, as I'm listening, I was sitting here going, wow, John just totally blows away my little, I love to do my hardest workout on Mondays. My cardio workout is on Mondays, right? I do a little game with my mind, like, let's make the hardest workout Monday. I got to get out of bed. It's Monday morning. And now I listen to yours. I'm like, yeah, I got to rethink this Monday thing. I might be undershooting it a little bit here. But no, it's amazing to me. And sometimes you hear about people who maybe they're not doing that much and they need to be pushed in another direction and do something, right? But to me, it sounds like you left behind, it was some definitely a comfort zone, right? Good job. You leave it to go do this. But I look at you now and hear you talk, and obviously you're the better for it. So you did the Kenya. We were talking a little bit before we started, and obviously I would love to hear a little bit about this, and I'm sure the audience would too. So you do the marathons, you run. So at one point you biked across, the United States. What was the reason behind that? Was that another like the hell with it? I'm going to now bike across the United States, or was there more behind it?
Well, the United States was probably my first. Actually, it probably was what influenced quite a lot of what I do now. Was I I'd never been to the United States, and after finishing university, I sort of was walking down. I remember, for your audience, I went to Edinburgh, and I was walking down sort of the city. It's quite hilly, and I just remember having this idea in my head of cycling across America. And originally it was like this sort of U shape, but I'd never cycled more than 20 miles in my life in a day. Never been to America. So for me, it was like, well, why is this idea coming in my head? And rather than sort of just shun it away, it sort of grew on me. And of course, when you have an idea like that, people sort of like, well, that's a silly idea. You've just finished university, you need to go and get a job and do this. And so I decided to get a job and then get enough money 6 months later to go and do it. And so the idea was, again, I just said, well, I want to go to New York and I want to go to San Francisco. And let's just travel across the country by bike and see what happens. And again, I didn't take a bike map or anything. So some of the places I ended up were completely off the trail, let's say. And, people at bars would just be like, well, what, why are you here? I was dressed in complete lycra and everything. But again, this is probably what influenced a lot of what I was doing. Before I went to America, some people would be like, oh, it's so dangerous in America. Or, Philadelphia is terrifying. Someone got shot 2 years ago or something. And you'd be like, oh God, that sounds terrifying. But actually, once I arrived and once I got going, I suddenly was just like completely blown away by the sort of hospitality and the kindness of the people of America. It was, to give you an example, I mean, it was like, to give you a run through of the first day. So the first day was from New York to Princeton University, which is about, I think, 70 miles. And with that, I had 4 panniers and everything on it. And I remember it'd been a long day. I'd never cycled more than 20 miles. And first day I just did 70 and I was quite exhausted, got into Princeton. I'd just finished university. So I was like, oh, Princeton University, it might be really fun. It might be, something going on. Realized it's the middle of the summer. I'm doing this in June, July. So everyone's gone. And anyway, I turn up in a sort of pizzeria there. And one of the funny things was, like, I did my research. So I was like, what's the average temperature? What's, if you need to stay at someone's house, how do you go about it? And it was like, well, you just go and knock on their door and say, can I camp on your lawn or something? And they can always say no, they can always say yes, but you see what happens. Anyway, I'm in a pizzeria, a cop walks in, and I'm like, oh, this is what I've been told. You need to go and speak to a cop and ask him. And so I speak to the cop and go, hi, I'm just down here for the night. I was wondering if there's a place you might find where I could go and camp. He's like, oh, no, not around here. And I was like, oh, well, do you know anyone? And he's like, no, there's only the hotel, which is $300. And, if you're traveling for months, you're on a sort of shoestring budget.
Right.
And at that exact point, the waiter behind goes, "Oh, I might be able to help you out. I might be able to give you a place to stay." And I was like, wow, that's amazing. But also at the same time, I was like, well, he might get off at like 12 and this is 7 o'clock. So I'll be waiting around for 5 hours. But he was like, no, I get off in an hour. I was like, okay, that's brilliant. So I wait. He's like, this is my address. I'm driving there. You can just cycle down. It's just down the road. So I cycled down. His family are there. They're like, hi, John, we've heard all about you. We've got a bed for you here. And I'm like, here's some supper. Dinner. And so they welcomed me in. They gave me food. They gave me a place to stay. And then the next day, they're like, well, if you're going up to St. Louis and this, we've got friends here. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is my introduction to America. And then the next day, I cycle from Princeton towards Philadelphia, and it's getting late. I'm absolutely exhausted. I go over a bridge, almost crash into someone. And he's like, whoa, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm looking for Motel 9 or something. And he's like, you mean Motel 6? And I was like, yeah, sorry. And he's like, oh, well, it's just down the road, but my girlfriend's out of town. You're more than welcome to come and stay with me. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, this does not happen. And again, it was just repetitive. It was in a sense of just all the time. And then, you're at a cafe and people like, again, I'm wearing Lycra, so I stick out like a sore thumb. My accent's probably slightly different to the American people. And so, they chat to me and then they get up and they leave. And then I ask the waitress for the bill and she goes, don't worry, it's taken care of by that couple. And I'm like, why would they pick up my bill? Why would they do this? And it just left an incredible gratitude for it. And that is really what makes, travel and adventure so incredible, is sometimes you break down these preconceptions or these ideas that you had, and it just opens your mind up to a whole new world.
And John, if I could just jump in for a second, I want to just say too, for my audience, a lot of my audience is probably very close Philadelphia area, things like that. And I will say this, it's a great time for this interview for me, because I'm going to be honest, lately, especially, like, as you probably can understand, right now, media coverage is so much about, like in the Philadelphia area, it's literally, we just hear every bad thing that's happened next, right? And I feel like it starts to, I try not to even watch anymore, right? Because for me, I just feel like it drags us down. So having you today and some positivity and hearing some of this amazing, stories about the generosity of people from around this area, it somewhat restores my confidence a little bit in my country, so to speak. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it hearing that. And so you mentioned New York and Philadelphia, but you also mentioned how you ended up off the beaten trail, so to speak. So for me, being in the United States, my route, I would assume I'm New York, maybe through Philadelphia. I go across maybe out, Ohio, Chicago, that way, ending up somewhat eventually in California. Sounds to me like you didn't take the most direct route, maybe, and you ended up in some off the beaten path places. So maybe just a little bit about one of those places I would like to hear. And the audience would probably like to hear also.
So the sort of traditional cycle across America bike route goes through sort of the middle America in terms of Kansas. I didn't do it, so I don't really know, but maybe St. Louis. But I sort of, what was happening was, at the time, it was unbelievably hot. I think this was in 2012, and it's not quite the Dust Bowl era, but there's a lot of corn and wheat that looks like it's about to die. And it's just absolutely roasting. And so I'm sort of cycling in 100-degree Fahrenheit every day. And it's just slightly bringing me down. And so my thinking was go north and it will be cooler. So I sort of headed up towards Chicago. And again, so another story about it was I was cycling in Pennsylvania up to a place called Frostburg, which actually I think might be in Maryland. And as I'm cycling up to the very top, it's getting quite cool. It's getting late in the evening, and I saw an inn that I could potentially camp or stay in. And as I'm cycling up, there's this guy with sort of white slick back hair, and he's on the balcony having a cigar. And as I get to the top, I sort of ask him, I'm like, excuse me, do you know where the reception is for the inn? And he goes, I know an accent when I hear it. Are you from Texas? And anyway, in my slightly British way, I was like, no, I'm actually from Britain. He's like, oh man, I'm messing with you. I know you're from Britain. I was there the other day or something. And anyways, we get chatting, we have a bit of banter back and forth. And then he's like, well, I live in Chicago in this really cool area. And, if you ever head up that way, come and stay. And this is in Pennsylvania or Maryland, Frostburg. And I'm like, well, I'm going St. Louis way, so probably won't, but thank you so much. I'll take your, I took down a sort of piece of paper with his name and a number. And so then it got very, very hot. And so I kept going north and I thought, okay, well, I'll go to Chicago. And so I stayed with him for 2 days, had an amazing time. He showed me amazing parts of Chicago. And then I went on. And when I say I sort of got off the beaten track was after Illinois, I went down to a place called like Juliet in Chicago. And I was just on like some, normal bike trail, which is completely like, it just goes from one town to the other. Anyway, I was like, do I camp here? Do I not? I'm just going to go and get some food. And so I went into this town. I think it was called Juliet. And anyway, I sort of stopped and I had, I think it was deep fried catfish, which for anyone who loves it, I fair play, but it's not to my, I remember it not being too nice. And anyway, as I come out, there was a group of about sort of 6 40, 45-year-old couples, quite pissed. They come out and they see me. And of course, again, I stick out like a sore thumb. I've got a bike with 4 panniers. I'm tall. I'm like 6'3", and I'm wearing Lycra. And so they're like, oh my God, who is this guy? Who's this guy? And so they sort of pounce on me and have a quick chat. And again, they're slightly tipsy. And they're like, well, come in and have a drink with us. So I then go into this wine bar. I'm sort of chatting away. And they're like, where are you staying tonight? And I was like, well, I'm going to just go and camp on the pathway somewhere. They're like, oh my God, no, you've got to come back. And so I went back, stayed with them for the night. And again, this sort of happened from time to time. And what it is I was just going through these towns, which they never see bikers. They're always like, oh, we saw a biker like you about 6 years ago, because it's not the route. And with that, just the most enormous amount of generosity and kindness comes from it, from people just along the route who just sort of kept me moving, kept me inspired to just keep going again and again, even when you're cycling in 107 degrees heat through the Midwest.
Yeah, John, I could listen all day to the stories. It gives me hope and it gives me more motivation to want to, continue on my own journey through fitness and to maybe liven it up even a little bit with some more, outdoorsy types of things. I want to ask, so for my audience, I like to ask people this. I do have a lot of people that listen that may not be in the best of shape currently. And I try to get my guests to maybe, if you could, anything you would say to anyone that's trying to get started, just anything to maybe give someone a little motivation who may not be feeling their best at this point.
I think it's very important to sometimes do what I do, but I realize, that sort of can be completely unnecessary and sometimes quite extreme. I always think the best thing to do is to break out of routine, in a sense of, if you're getting up every day and you're struggling to find time to do this, or just set aside an hour or something a week. Just break the mold. If you're, I don't know, having hot showers, have a cold shower. Just break something that gets you out of a routine which you are not enjoying. And adventure is, it's such a broad word. Adventure means something different to everyone. And if you want to go on these sort of adventures, whether you live in the middle of the city, just make time. An adventure can be, is, I don't know, getting a whole load of numbers from 1 to 20, and then going and taking one out, and then going and stand on that platform at your train station. And the next train, you go 2 miles out, wherever it is, and you just go and explore that region. It doesn't have to be another country. It doesn't have, COVID sort of taught me a lot about, just exploring your own. I did a paddleboarding trip from source to sea of our longest river. I'd never really paddleboarded, but it's just that idea of just breaking something. And so challenge yourself to do something different, I would probably say, is the best thing you can do.
Actually, it's very simplistic, John, honestly, but it's so true. And it actually, even for me, you mentioned a couple things there, even about I'm guilty of it. I'm happy right now with what I'm doing, especially with my fitness, things like that. But listening to you speak, it it encourages me to want to try to do more. And listening to you about biking across the country, even my own country, my own city, my own state, I know there's more to do. So I will recommend to anybody listening. I 100% agree with what John said. Really just try to break the routine. Something a little different could, that little thing to break the routine could lead to a lot of bigger things and challenges that you'll end up enjoying. So, John, I wanted to give you a couple minutes here at the end just to let people know. I'm going to just preface this. I was on John's website and looking at some of his social media last night. I highly suggest it. There's a lot of really cool pictures, and I'll even go as far as to say breathtaking pictures. It's very amazing stuff. So, John, maybe let people know where they could take a look at some of that stuff and get listen to you more in some of your interviews with fellow adventurers on your podcast.
Yeah, well, I'm on Instagram at John Horsfall, JohnHorsfall. And also my website is zibaadventures.com, which is ZIBA Adventures. It was sort of taken from the Persian word for beautiful. So the idea was beautiful adventures around the world. And so with that, I sort of run a podcast called the Modern Adventurer Podcast, and it talks to adventurers sort of like me who do extraordinary stuff, polar explorers, Everest climbers, world record holders. So we've had, amazing people up and down length of the world just coming on the podcast to talk about why they do what they do. And it's very interesting to sort of get into the psyche of why people do these sort of trips. So those are probably the best. I also have a YouTube channel, and yeah, always happy to chat and always happy to hear from people. So follow me on Instagram or come and see me on my website.
Yeah, John, I can't recommend it enough. And just especially I myself, I listened to one episode of your podcast, and I'm definitely going to listen to more. I'd like to end for my audience with this. Listening to those types of podcasts about people and what they're doing, trust me, you will get motivation from it. And it may be the additional motivation or that spark that you need to do the things that you need to do. So please check out John's social media, check out his podcast. John, thank you again so much. Really appreciate it. And if you ever get back to America, I think we have to. I'm asking you. I want to be the one to follow you around and document it for my podcast. So let me know, okay?
Oh, well, that'd be absolutely awesome, Charles. I'm sort of trying to think of a way of trying to get back. I suddenly realized a couple of weeks ago, it's been nearly 10 years since I was last in America. So I'm always looking for ways to try and get back to it.
Well, John, that would be great. And who knows, everyone, stay tuned. We might have, following John around the country, seeing some of his adventures. So, all right, everyone. Well, thank you again. Have a great day and get out there, have your own adventures. Take care. Bye.
This has been the Bare Essentials. Thanks for listening, and remember, never hibernate on your goals.